Hi, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover. Today I have Sarah Aziza, right? And we're talking about this beautiful, gorgeous book, The Hollow Half. Sarah, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh my God, I love your book. And why don't you tell us about the book and yeah, the significance of it?
Thank you. Yeah, I started writing it in 2020, just, not as a book. I didn't have that in mind, but just as a project to sort of understand my personal legacy better and try to connect some dots about, like, through from my story into the past and vice versa. I was going through a bit of like an emotional and mental and physical crisis, which is where the book starts. And I had a feeling that it wasn't just about me, and it was had to do as well with, the history that my body was carrying. And so the book kind of traces between the years 2019 back through to like the early 1920s, maybe when my grandmother was born in Palestine, and weaves back and forth between the Middle East, actually North Africa, and my home in the Midwest, and then New York. And yeah, I kind of like I blend a couple of genres and a couple, I guess, like registers. Some parts of it are more like based on research or critical theory, and other parts are very personal, and other parts are more like poetry. So it's a bit of a blend of a book. And I really appreciate, yeah, getting the chance to talk about it, and that you read it and reached out.
How did you give yourself permission to write this book? Because I think it's so vulnerable, it's so open,
Mm.
talking about your own journey with like mental health and body and all these things, and talking about family and linking all these things, right? And
Yeah.
I think writing such a beautiful book that intertwines everything, it's like there's a form of permission you have to give yourself,
Mm.
right? And how did you do
Yeah.
that?
That's such a great observation, because it did feel that way. It did feel like it took a while to give myself permission to do this book in this way. Because I'm actually a journalist by training, so it's almost like the practice was the opposite. It was everything has to be very linear, very like explained. Everything has to be based on like a very specific definition of what a fact is as well. Like, were you there, or like, is there a credible like academic source that you can point to that says this is exactly how it was? Or, I was researching intergenerational trauma or like epigenetics, which is a new field, and trying to almost corroborate my personal experience based on the most official version of science or the archive. But then I think it was, again, it goes back to the fact that this was a personal project first. I worked on it for almost 2 years before I even started pitching it. So I think just in this personal space, private space, I started experimenting more with different ways to explore how I felt or what my intuition was telling me through my body, through my dreams, through family stories. There were just certain things that seemed to echo off each other in a way that, yeah, I just felt like I needed to investigate. So, yeah, I think I started putting things on the page, and it just started to feel so much truer the more experimental I got, and the more poetic I got, or the more I weaved different things in and sort of like took charge of my own story in a way. In a way, it was like a project of expanding and bringing in more stories, but in another way, it was a case of, no, I actually know what I'm experiencing. And all these years of going to doctors that say certain things are real or not real. Or, I was having all of these like physical symptoms as well that doctors couldn't explain. But I was starting to realize that I think I knew where they were coming from in a lot of ways. Not to say doctors don't know what they're talking about, but I think a lot of us know a lot more than we recognize, or maybe like give ourselves permission to recognize. So just starting to trust my intuition and seeing what was coming onto the page, feeling a lot more true. I just kind of the momentum kind of built, and I just got really invested in building this world and this story first and foremost in a way that I felt was true to myself and then my people. And then when I started to think about it more as a book, at that point I was so convinced that, this was the mode and like the this was the mode and this was the, number of stories and sources that it was going to take to sort of reflect my truth. And I didn't want to sacrifice that. And I was lucky that I had an editor that was really supportive. So by the time I decided it was a book, I was like, this is what it is. Take it or leave it in a way, in a very gracious sort of version of that. But yeah, I didn't want to sacrifice. I spent my whole life trying to make myself legible and easy to explain and understand to like white Americans, and I was just trying something different this time, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I feel like to tell such an intricate story about Sarah and Sarah's body and
Mhm.
like all this history, you have to have this hybridity. You have to bring
Yeah.
everyone in and just try different tactics, right? And
Mhm.
so we don't feel like it's didactic. We can sense like the individual, we can sense the community, we can sense the history through
Yeah.
all this weaving. And I think it's so beautiful. How did you navigate writing about family secrets and trauma with tenderness and care?
Mhm.
Um,
It's a good question. I think it took um yeah, I think it took a lot of baby steps. It didn't feel safe necessarily to go into all of these stories right away. I wanted to be very cautious, especially since this involved a lot of interviewing of family members. I think I was more cautious with them than with myself. But I learned also to take my time with myself. So with my father, my uncles, things like that, I definitely started with like the happy stories, the like good times, the stories I'd heard them tell a bunch of times. I was like, okay, let's go over it one more time. But this time I'm listening almost as a journalist or as a storyteller. And let me pick up on details and ask for more information. And it sort of built out a little bit organically that way, sort of like opening up, and then I would see certain details or certain almost like doorways and feel, just sort of like try to trust my intuition if this was the right time to maybe like push on that a little bit and ask like, okay, when you got pushed out of Gaza, I just know that the story goes you were forced out of Gaza and you ended up in Saudi Arabia, and then the story continues, but there's no way there wasn't a lot of emotion in that moment in your life. Like, do you remember, you were 7, 8, did you feel relief because you were back reunited with your father? Did you feel sad? Gentle, questions. And watching my father sort of like come to his own recognition of, yeah, there actually are so many griefs maybe that I'm carrying that I haven't thought about in years or didn't even have time in the moment because you're surviving to really, yeah, grieve. Just asking a lot of permission before I went into some of those things. Like, hey, I know this might be a hard thing. Let's not talk about it if you don't feel like it. So I think when you're face to face with someone you love, you know how to have care and gentleness. And then towards myself, I think I needed a little more practice, or like I had to do a little more trial and error because especially at the beginning when I was just trying to figure things out, I was just like diving headfirst into memories, um, and my body actually taught me how to slow down because I would have really profound, like, physical reactions sometimes. And I think, yeah, it's in the book a little bit, but also many people have probably experienced this, whether it's headaches or, I had a really bad back spasm where I could hardly move for a while. Just like signs that maybe like you're bringing up something that's like it's really painful or heavy for your body, and I had to, take a whole summer off in a way, of writing into certain memories because the second I touched it, it was like my whole body reacted, and I decided, I'm maybe actually at that moment I was like, okay, so this memory of this violent thing that happened to me isn't going in the book. It's clear that my body can't process this into words right now. And if it ended up being like more than a year later, that with therapy and other things outside of writing, it started to make sense to put a little bit of it in the book, not as like a flashy, like, let me show you some more trauma, but more like my story doesn't make sense unless you know that this thing happened to me. And, at that point, I felt more distance. So I think it was a lot of trying to like respond and listen to my body and my intuition. Also, yeah, the capacities of others if they were involved in those stories. And taking my time. I mean, the book took about 4.5 years to write, which is a long time, but also not that long. It kind of depends, but there were certain parts of it that were simmering that I would revisit and then like put away and then come back to, depending on how it seemed like everyone was doing.
it when like speaking to reading your book, it like I think about how with trauma there's this ghost. There's a ghost that happens within you in trauma
Hmm.
that physically that physicality was manifested in anorexia, right?
Hmm.
And are manifested in so much pain and like in writing this and in uncovering all these things with yourself and your family, it's like you're exercising the ghost of colonialism, of trauma, and all these things to become whole again.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I feel very seen when you say that. It definitely felt like there were things at a certain point, I was almost amazed that I didn't realize how many ghosts there were, how many layers and years and presences that like we were all carrying in my family. It seems so obvious to me now that I've excavated and exercised all of those. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I use the word ghost pretty liberally now. Like I say, oh yeah, I believe in ghosts, or, there's ghosts in this book. And it's more, that's a word that I use to say, the past is alive and with us. I think that the ancestors are very present, however you want to describe it. And ghosts are, maybe in Western context, people hear ghosts and they think, oh, it must be like a negative thing, a frightening thing. And of course it can be. And in some cases, it was a painful thing, but also I'm so grateful for some of these ghosts because it means that I'm staying connected to people I love or places that maybe are extremely painful. Like I was telling you before we started recording, like I was on the phone with my family in Gaza today, and in a way, being a Palestinian is feeling haunted all the time, um, because the land and the people are not free yet. So there's this looming sense, even in the present, all the time of we're carrying that grief with us. But
Another thing I wanted to talk about is like the racialization of the body, and you talk about that a lot, and and then how like just in terms of like the stratification of like racism and identity and femininity, how like white women was perceived to be one way and black women this way.
Mhm.
And I really love how you brought that in context because it made me think about like, the statue on 42nd Street where
Yeah.
a statue of a black woman who's, voluptuous and standing there so strong and astute. And like there were a lot of like commentary about it just because like they're like, why it has to be a fat woman? Why does it all these things,
Mhm.
right? And it's just like it's it it also reminds me that like as a woman your body is never free and it's always
Yeah,
to be critiqued and picked at.
so true. Yeah, that was a hard thing for me to. I mean, obviously, I still have to exist in this world, so in a way, it's not a settled like issue, right? I'm like still working my way through this, yeah, reality. But I've said that a lot to people, especially like AFAB, like non-femme people. I'm like, you don't understand how everyone thinks that our body is just like public property. Like it's anybody who wants to has a right to comment on it, have an opinion on it. There's
Yeah.
no privacy in a way. And yeah, I was grappling with that a lot, especially the end, like chapter or last two chapters or so of the book, where the character of Sarah is coming to some of these realizations. Oh, patriarchy, oh, racism. But then what do you do when you still live in a world full of racism and patriarchy and misogyny? And it's a difficult thing because in some ways the frontier is like our body. Like each of us has like the battle that is like the surface of our skin. Like this is like a first battlefront is like how do we protect ourselves? How do we move through the world and try and live in freedom, like in our own relationship with ourselves?
Yeah.
But then like you might become amazing at self-love and, all the right mindsets, but you walk into the world and you're confronted by the powers that be that are the opposite. So, yeah, I think it's an open question, an ongoing struggle. And I think same with like, Palestine not being free yet. Like these are like, it's like you're straddling two realities. It's like you can free yourself from within, but then also there's this battle to free the external like reality.
I love
I think they're connected.
I love how you like that.
Hmm.
Okay, I have like a question, and like I asked this writer, a poet who I interviewed like earlier this year, the same question because her book was about like domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And, I wanted to talk about that, but I don't want to talk about these things that are like, and make it in very sensational because it's
Hmm.
about so much more. And like, how do we talk about your book? Like, because there's so many layers, but there's a layer of like anorexia, right? And how do we talk about it without like sensationalize it and without like objectifying Sarah?
Wow. Whew. It's a great question. I really appreciate that question too, because it's very interesting because sometimes I forget. I mean, I don't obviously forget about the anorexia element, but especially right now in this time of genocide, I'm thinking about the Palestine parts of the story, because I think the anorexia came after the
Yeah,
Nakba. It's connected to Palestine. So anyway, so for me, that's like first and foremost. But then I meet certain people that are like, oh, it's a book about anorexia. And I'm like, oh, that's not how I feel about it. But it is an important element. And it is like, if I didn't put that in the book, it would be a very different book. But
yeah,
reckoning with it felt like really important.
yeah,
And there's a whole community of people who are wrestling with, eating disorders or other mental health issues that aren't Palestinian, and they're my community too. And I was thinking about them while I was writing as well. But yeah, it's an interesting question because there is a whole genre that's pretty sensational, where it's just like, wow, how skinny did you get? Wow, like tell me, like, people go into like really intense details about their restrictions and things like that, and that can actually become a trigger
yeah,
for other people who are still struggling. So I was trying to, first and foremost, I was wondering like, how do I not trigger people? And I did include like one or two details about food or weight, but it was, I debated that, but it was a way to like give people context of like why I was in the hospital. But then after that, I wanted to be more not intellectual because it's a very visceral book, but like never let it be just one thing and never let someone get too like distracted by, wow, how extreme, her her exercise habit was or things like that. So um, I think you're doing an amazing job. I mean, like, if everyone could be like you and, like, come with such thoughtful, warm questions that talk about multiple different themes
yeah,
and how they do connect to the body, I think that's like, it's such a gift to me. And yeah, I tried to write it in a way that didn't give people as much material to sensationalize, because there are definitely editors who looked at the book who would have wanted to write it and publish it with me,
yeah,
that were looking for something much more sensational. I knew that was not the right route for me. So hopefully the book is a good place to start. It's not as sensational as others. And then readers like you are exactly who I was hoping the book would meet. So if
yeah.
they could be more like you, that'd be great.
No problem. I just because I think it's really important for us to like talk about the body, and especially like it's this breaking down and how trauma affects the body, but also be like, hey, I'm a person and I still exist, and you cannot
Wow.
intrude into my like
Yeah.
life because I've given you some example of my life.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, wow. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's one reason why I do little things like, I block out the name of my partner, or no, the nickname that my partner calls me. It's a little reminder like, hey, I'm not just dumping every detail of my life out. Like, there's other moments where, I stop as scene and I leave some white space or silence or we move on, because there are moments where I want the reader to understand this isn't just like my diary or like my mental health notes. Like, it's a
Yeah,
crafted piece of art, and people who are racialized, like ethnicized, or who have trauma or mental health issues. There's this assumption some readers have of like, I want to know all the details, and there's no privacy. You've kind of forfeit your privacy by writing the story. And yeah, I disagree, and I think that actually those books are not as meaningful.
no.
There needs to be meaning made out of it, not just dumped.
Okay, I have two more questions, but like while you were speaking, it just reminded me of how your book like really taught me like that deep connection we have with like our ancestral home.
Yeah.
Or you can just be like, I'm American. That's it. That's my
Yeah.
father's land, grandmother's land. Keep it moving. But like you have this deep, affirming, and beautiful connection to like your ancestral home. And if you can just talk about the importance of home, and
Wow. Yeah.
you've lived in many places, why
Mhm.
is that important?
Wow. That's a beautiful question. Thank you. Yeah, I think diaspora or ghurba is the name of the first chapter, which is an Arabic word that's hard to translate. It means basically like exile or being estranged from your place. Um, Again, it's painful. It's painful to attach your home not to not do the thing you're describing of like I'm just American, whatever. Like that's the easier option, but it didn't work for me. Like deep down, I think my heart knew that there was a place I was missing and a people I was missing, and that's part of why I ended up struggling so much mentally and emotionally. So I had to be honest that, my heart is attached to a place that's not here. But what do I do now where it's a place where, they make it so hard for me to go. Um, I think honestly, for a lot of us maybe who are estranged in that way from our original places, it becomes sort of a stitching together of many things. It is a connecting through our culture. It is a connecting to our community, whoever they might be, like however we can do that. Maybe it's language. For me, it was language. It's not for everyone. And then, the resistance of not allowing those things to be erased or not allowing our history to be told by someone else. The resistance of even trying to go back, even for visits, is something that was important for me. For everybody, I think it's a different balance, but I think it becomes this constellation. If it's not a simple, like, I'm from this place, I was born and raised here, we have to come up with new ways. And I think in community, it can be very profound and a very beautiful and galvanizing thing.
I just like I really love this conversation, and I'm just like, there's so many things to talk about, like, but
I know, I would love
I'm
that.
going to be like, shh. I think this, you know, I think this book is so beautiful, so layered, and really needed. And I hope that like it goes out in the world and do the job that it is intended to do.
Oh, thank
We
you.
need to read something like this, but also we need to read something that is just like drop dead beautiful, right?
Oh,
There's so many like ugliness in the world, and we need to be like a book that like just like makes us levitate. I feel like your book like makes us like emotionally and intellectually levitate because language, but because of just everything and how you connect it and how you connect history, identity, people, body, politics. It's just so important for us. I think, and I do think like your book and so many books like this is like what the novel is going to be. It's going to
Mhm.
be about hybridity, and this is just like in line of the next generation of the novel and memoirs.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. That's extremely, extremely meaningful to hear from a reader like you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Um, okay, my last question, I ask everyone this question, and it's based on Edwidge Danticat, My Queen, the Holy Grail.
Oh, yes. Amazing. Oh my God.
It's
Yeah.
about creating dangerously and like the importance of like artists, immigrants, artists, and writers creating dangerously. And so, Sarah, how are you creating dangerously?
Oh, that's such a good question. Whew. I mean, that's an amazing, like, Edwidge Dennicott is amazing. I also took a lot of cues from June Jordan. She has that poem, I Must Become a Menace to My Enemies.
Yeah. Oh,
It's very, yeah, it's just like very fierce, and like I said, I was writing almost, a third of this book or more, and I was doing all the editing during the current genocide. So I was thinking like, if I'm going to write a book, I want it to be dangerous. I want it to be dangerous to power, to, the forces of imperialism and patriarchy and all those things. So how am I creating dangerously? I hope I'm creating more dangerously every day. I think I changed the subject of the last chapter to resistance, and I really tried to go really hard towards like this idea of refusal and the idea of like we don't have to have like a perfect blueprint for a new world order in order to be able to say genocide is wrong, racism is wrong. Like the current order is making so many of us unsafe and sick, like so the refusal is kind of what I'm thinking about now. Like how do I make art that like you're very kind to say it's beautiful, like beauty should call us towards like, a more full and inspired life. And when we hit the roadblocks of like imperialism, colonialism, all these things, like we shouldn't fall back. Inshallah, what we'll do is say, no, like I feel called to like through love and through beauty and all those things to like fight for a world where we can live the full and beautiful and loving life that I know it is being stirred inside me. So I think it's like a combination for me of creating art that calls people towards like their higher love and beauty, and then also strengthens them and gives them language to point out like the things that we need to refuse and push against and resist in order to get there. So it's kind of an abstract answer, but that's sort of like my philosophy right now is like, what are we saying yes to and what are we saying no to? Say yes to love and beauty and home and like our bodies and our ancestors, and then say no to all of the things that are trying to erase those things or harm those things. And if my art can do one or both of those things, then I consider it like successful.
Sarah, thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure for talking to you. I really appreciate you. I'm going
Thank you. This was a huge pleasure and honor as well.